Oh, there's nothing worse than when an otherwise solid film forgets to hire convincing stand-ins. The job of stunt doubles, camera doubles, and body doubles alike is essentially to be unseen, with their work masked by production tricks to create a seamless edit. Sure, it's hard to find the perfect pairing for a lot of actors when their distinctive appearance can often be the very thing that netted them the attention in the first place. Most infamously, it took a few decades for a believable replacement for Arnold Schwarzenegger to be found, given the actor's unique physique. That said, sometimes it can be hard to sympathise with filmmakers when their shortcuts are visible on screen. The effective immersion created by a convincing story and involving characters can be shattered in a second by the wrong wig or too broad a pair of shoulders, replacing the instantly recognisable stars we know and love. This list compiles a handful of cases, many of them taken from otherwise classic, or at least halfway decent, flicks, where the stand-ins weren't able to pass for the real deal, and the film's verisimilitude paid a price. I'm Kirsten from What Culture, and these are 10 hilariously obvious stand-ins who ruined their scenes. Number 10, Paige, Fighting with My Family. Alright, so we do feel a little bad pointing this one out, but between being both Ari Aster and Greta Gerwig's new muse, and netting herself an Oscar nod, Florence Pugh is very much the woman of the moment right now. So it's only fair for us to note that in one of her first major roles, the actress declined to appear for one pivotal scene, and, well, it's pretty hard to miss the fact in the finished flick. The Little Women actress did accrue some serious bruises during the shoot, where she played a wrestling superstar, Paige, in the critically adored biopic Fighting with My Family. However, Pugh opted out of doing the more dramatic scenes herself, wisely leaving it to the professionals. Whilst Paige herself was set to act as her stunt double, the star was out of action with an injury during filming, leading the creators to call in Tessa Blanchard. Only trouble is, like Paige herself, Blanchard is significantly taller than the diminutive Pugh, meaning the climactic fight bounces blatantly between the Midsummer actress and a broad-shouldered, square-jawed stand-in. There's also the fact that Blanchard is instantly recognisable to many wrestling fans, a lot of whom make up the intended audience of the film. Number 9, Jack Geller, Friends. No one can say for sure why the thespian who plays Ross and Monica's dad, Jack Geller, wasn't around for some scenes. In any case, the very expensive arrival of the classic 90s sitcom on the streaming giant Netflix recently led a lot of longtime fans to a nostalgic rewatch. It was then that the internet at large noticed that in the episode The One in Massapequa, Jack Geller was replaced by a stand-in who is off the charts unrecognisable. In fact, were it not for his positioning in the scene, a casual observer probably wouldn't realise the stand-in was even intended to replace the absent Gould. His suit changes between shots, along with his face, hair and height, and that's not even getting into the pair of glasses which magically appear on his face. Number 8, Marty McFly, Back to the Future. As many a movie buff will inform you, Michael J. Fox wasn't always going to be Marty McFly. When director Bob Zemeckis, later of Forrest Gump and Welcome to Marwindale fame / infamy, was trying to put the flick together, he had hoped that the then star of Family Ties would want to be the part. But Fox's involvement with the show tied up his schedule too much. Producers auditioned Johnny Depp before settling on casting Eric Stoltz. However, the chemistry just wasn't there, and crucially, Stoltz was uncomfortable on Marty's iconic skateboard. So the production was rearranged once more to accommodate Fox's schedule, and thus an all-time classic franchise was born. With the pre-production chaos, it's easy to understand why stand-ins were utilised regularly throughout the shoot. But it is a bit galling to discover Fox was an adept skateboarder given the chase scene with Biff's gang midway through the flick. The diminutive Fox grows a foot taller and gains a mane of black hair, along with a new face, as he hops over the passengers of Biff's car. And he really must be back from the future, because the stand-in for Marty McFly looks at least a decade Fox's senior. Number 7, Miles Finch, Elf. Peter Dinklage hasn't gotten where he is without a sense of humour, and the actor has proved time and time again that he's happy to take on roles which address his short stature, either for comedic or dramatic effect. Just look at the classic moment when he calls out bad dad Tywin Lannister during his trial as Tyrion on HBO mega-hit Game of Thrones. As such, the actor was happy to play the irascible children's author Miles Finch for 2003's classic Christmas comedy Elf, where his role basically amounts to getting steadily angrier at Will Ferrell's titular innocent abroad buddy before beating the living shit out of him. It's a hilarious sequence and one of the fondest remembered moments from director Jon Favreau's flick. However, upon re-watching the scene, you might notice a pretty glaring mistake. Yes, the stand-in who thumps Ferrell into a painting isn't particularly tall, but they're also very clearly not a little person, unlike Dinklage, and the sudden change in proportions makes for a surreal shot mid-scene where Finch seems to have body surfed into another person. Number 6, Zora, Blade Runner. Ridley Scott's tortured masterpiece has been through countless revisions since its initial release in 1982, when a butchered studio-approved cut was derided by both audiences and critics. Time has been kind to the Vangelis-scored flick, with everything from its cyberpunk aesthetic to its philosophical approach to sci-fi themes becoming touchstones for later successes in the genre. One glaring flaw which the original flick had, along with a nonsensical ending cobbled together from leftover Kubrick B-roll, is its frequent and woefully unconvincing use of stand-ins for pivotal scenes. The most blatant and infamous instance of this recurring issue comes in the form of replicant Zora's otherwise spectacular, striking death scene. The operatic atmosphere is punctured brutally by the realisation that actress Joanna Cassidy isn't the one jumping through those glass panes. Stand-in Lee Pulford can't particularly pass for her, and Scott wisely reshot the entire scene for one of the film's later, more complete and creator-approved iterations. The scene is even stranger when you consider that Cassidy was happy to have an actual python around her neck in an earlier scene, though the fact that her reptile was her own pet in real life can't have hurt. Number 5, All of the Kids. E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Spielberg utilised his typical ingenuity in the making of E.T., and the 1982 family masterpiece remains a pretty great argument for the use of stand-ins. The eponymous spaceman was played by a stuntman who was under 3 foot tall for many scenes, allowing him a convincing range of movement on screen and making his interactions with the young protagonists convincing to this day. As a result, E.T. convinces completely, and the classic flick still holds a place as one of American cinema's most impressive achievements. That said, not all of the stand-in work done in the film is quite as clever, and there are a few scenes near the film's close which still leave us shaking our heads in disbelief. Full disclosure, we're not really sure how best to film a potentially dangerous bicycle chase scene with child protagonists. That said, there are definitely better methods than shooting the sequence using adult actors with their faces mostly obscured. It's a cringeworthy trick which doesn't pass muster upon a rewatch, but we're safe to give Spielberg this one. Number 4, April Booth, Machete. Starlet Lindsay Lohan has never been a stranger to risque behaviour, both on and off screen, and in the last decade or so it's become harder and harder to believe that the Mean Girls actress and tabloid staple was ever known more for acting chops than real-life antics. When Robert Rodriguez helmed his 2010 Grindhouse spin-off film Machete, he stuffed the cast with unlikely cameos ranging from Steven Seagal to Miami Vice's Don Johnson. High among the list of names appearing in the Danny Trejo starring action thriller was Lohan, who played a gun-wielding nun in the film, which may be about the most Robert Rodriguez role imaginable for any actor, regardless which of his films they're in. However, when it came time for Lohan to bear all during one of the film's numerous nude scenes, the actor opted to utilise the services of a body double. Nothing wrong with that decision, provided the casting department can find someone who looks at least a little like the actor they're replacing. Unfortunately, Lohan's looks proved as one of a kind as her career success implied, and the body double looked nothing like her. The effect was disastrous enough to derail even a flick as intentionally campy as Machete. Number 3, Lara Croft, Tomb Raider 2. Okay, so admittedly, this one is more understandable than, say, sloppy stand-ins featuring a rom-com. The effect it has on the film really isn't ameliorated by that fact. When Angelina Jolie signed on to play iconic PlayStation heroine Lara Croft, she no doubt knew the role would require a manner of acrobatics. Luckily, most action hero roles come complete with a stunt double for any risky manoeuvres, much like steamier roles have a body double guaranteed for trepidatious stars. After all, no one wants to risk the life and limbs of a superstar like Jolie when there are plenty of perfectly suitable stunt performers to stand in for her. And by all means, hiring any of those suitable stunt women would have worked out great. What didn't go over quite so well was the production's inexplicable decision to hire a man to stand in for Jolie during the motorcycle chase scene, resulting in a sequence more laughable than intense or suspenseful. While Jolie may still struggle to find a perfect match for her famously striking appearance, her later forays into the action genre such as 2010's thriller Salt at least saw her paired with a stand-in of the correct gender. Number 2, Gimli, Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson's trilogy of Tolkien adaptations is one of the most impressive cinematic spectacles of this century, an immersive experience which never sacrifices character or narrative momentum to showcase its groundbreaking effects and staggeringly detailed production design. The trio of films adapted from the Lord of the Rings series brought together an incredible ensemble cast as diverse as Cate Blanchett, Viggo Mortensen, and Ian McKellen, and even relative newcomers held their own against fantasy film stalwarts in a flick without a weak link in its massive set of players. Of course, managing to convince was easier for some actors than others, given how often their stand-ins were able to save them the effort of appearing on screen. In the case of John Rhys Davies' Gimli, the actor actually managed to spend less time shooting with the cast than his stand-in did. Unfortunately, that's not a hard fact to guess when rewatching the films. However, there is at least a fair reason for Davies' frequent absence. At 6 feet tall, the actual actor is nowhere near as short as the height required for his signature role. Number 1, Pris, Blade Runner. What could Ridley Scott's sci-fi opus have done to deserve a second spot on this list, particularly when the film's first appearance is one of the most maligned cases of bad stand-in syndrome in cinema history? Well, we felt the need to include this entry because Blade Runner struggles with unconvincing doubles more than once during its runtime. Daryl Hannah is best known for her iconic turn as Pris, one of the more volatile replicants Deckard is pursuing. Her fight scene with Harrison Ford's protagonist is a convincing and impressive display, and for good reason. Unlike many actors, Hannah was not only willing to do her own stunts, but as a former gymnast, it was her idea to incorporate some of the more impressive moves into the sequence. All of which only makes it more inexplicable that the film opted to use a male stand-in for the handful of shots Hannah couldn't handle, and a tall, broad one who's built like a wrestler at that. The blatant switch is impossible to miss, and an unfortunately laughable moment in an otherwise incredible flick.